Now we'll get started. Like Sabina said, we're going to talk about kind of how science relates to our Christian dogma and what the limitations of what some of the scientific theories out there might be. Okay? So I don't know why it says continuing the work of the apostles. I should have changed that, but for some reason I didn't. That's okay. So we're going to talk about dogma and like what it means. The creation in the Bible, the Genesis chapter 1, the story of creation. In intelligent design and its implications in Genesis chapter 1. Time and how we understand the concept of time, Big Bang Theory, macroevolution and microevolution, and how God and intelligent design can or cannot play a role in some of these theories, if that makes sense. Okay? Everybody's with me so far? Okay, all right. If anyone gets lost or confused, please just stop me and interrupt me and I can try to clarify. Okay. So, dogma is a set of undoubted and unquestioned beliefs that are accepted by members of a group. So, in our orthodox understanding of dogma, we have a few sources. Okay? So, number one of those sources is the Holy Bible. Okay? Two is apostolic teachings and traditions that have been carried throughout the generations by the apostles and so on and so forth. The Nicene Creed, everybody knows what the Nicene Creed is, yes? That's the creed given to us by St. Athanasius in the Council of Nicaea. And other ecumenical councils, you have the Council of Chalcedon, the Council of Ephesus, all of these different councils, right? Okay. This is where we get our church dogma from. Okay. If you guys have your Bibles or even your phones, that's fine. You can open Genesis chapter 1, and we'll go through Genesis chapter 1 together. And this will be kind of the church dogma and the church understanding on creation. I know we all probably already know the story, but it's okay. We can read it together. Who can read for me? Maybe from verse 1 to verse 8. Ivano? Alright, perfect.
In the beginning God made heaven and earth. The earth was invisible and unfinished, and darkness was over the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light, it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, the darkness he called night, and there was evening and morning one day. Then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, and let it divide the water from the water," and it was so. Thus God made the firmament, and God divided the water under the firmament from the water above the firmament. So God called the firmament heaven, and God saw that it was good, and there was evening and morning the second day.
Okay, thank you, Ivana. So I want you guys, as we're reading this section, to pay close attention to what is created on each day. Okay, so what was created on the first day? Light. Okay, very good. Then what was created on the second day? Heaven and earth. Okay. Is it earth? Does it say earth? No, it doesn't say earth. It says, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the water, and let it divide the water from the water," and it was so. Thus God made the firmament, and God divided the water under the firmament from the water above the firmament. So the earth has not yet been created. Just a division of water above the heavens and below the heavens. Okay? Everyone's good? Okay. Now, somebody can read for me the next section from verse 9 to verse 19. Steve, Guba? Sorry. Guba.
Then God said, "Let the water under heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. The water under the heaven was gathered into its places, and the dry land appeared. So God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth the herb of grass, bearing seed according to its kind and likeness. Let the fruit tree bear fruit whose seed is in itself according to its kind on earth." It was so. Thus the earth brought forth the herb of grass, bearing seed according to its kind and likeness. The fruit tree bore fruit whose seed is in itself according to its kind on earth. God saw that it was good. So evening and morning were the third day. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven for illumination to divide day from night. Let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years. Let them be for illumination in the firmament of heaven to give light on the earth." And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of heaven to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. God saw that it was good. So evening and morning were the fourth day.
Okay, very good. So what was made on the third day? The earth and the plants, yes. And there was a division between the dry land and the sea, yes? Okay, all right. And then on the fourth day, what was made on the fourth day? Sun, moon, stars. Okay. Keep this one, the fourth day, in the back of your mind, because we're going to come back to it later. But let me ask this question too in the meantime. Do you guys think that the order of which God created things is by accident, or he meant to do that?
It was on purpose.
He did this is on purpose, right? Okay. Any ideas as to why that might be on purpose? Okay, all right. We'll come back to that later on in the talk. Okay. So who can read 20? Someone can just read 20 to 27. Oh, sorry, 28. Anyone? Okay, Sabina,
And
please.
God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmaments of the heavens." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth a living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth, each according to its kind." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth."
Okay, thank you, Sabina. So we had the fifth day. What did we get on the fifth day? Fish and animals and birds. Okay, and then on the anyone besides Sabina? Sixth day? Yeah, Guba.
He made man.
Yes. But on the fifth day, we also got like land animals and all types of animals, right? Yes. And then on the sixth day, we made man in the not we God made man in the image of the Trinity of the likeness of the Trinity. That's when it says let us. It's talking about the Trinity, right? Okay. Okay. So now we're gonna talk about. Have you guys heard of this concept of intelligent design? Yes. Okay. All right. So intelligent design is a concept where certain features of the universe are too complex to have arisen by undirected processes like evolution, suggesting that we were created by intelligent cause. Okay, can someone tell me something here in what we just read that like points to why there's an order to the way God created things and this kind of concept of intelligent design? Yes.
I think one of the reasons why he created it in this way is because either that man was going to discover eventually or try to discover like how everything came to be. And if you look at the order it was made or it was written, it's the same order that scientific evolution is explaining how we came to be also.
Oh, when you say scientific evolution, are you talking about like the theories of Darwin and stuff like that?
Somewhat. Not every single thing, but most of what scientific evolution has proven to be true, like water was here and then from water came bacteria and so on and so forth, or whatever way, it's also the same way that it's explained here in the Bible.
Sure. Okay. Let me ask the question this way: Would it make any sense for would it have worked or been possible that the animals come before the plants? No, right? Why not?
They would die.
They would die. The animals eat from the plants, right? And would it make sense if the plants were created in an earth with darkness? No, right? The plants would also die. Okay, that's the point that I'm trying to get at. The order here matters because the thing that came, the next thing depends on the thing that came before, right? Okay. So if you look at something like the Big Bang Theory, it can't really be anything other than intelligent design because the conditions required for expansion of the universe, for example, are not accidental. First of all, they say that this Big Bang Theory came from a single point with infinite heat and energy and all of these things. Okay, where did this all come from? No, you ask them that question, they don't. There's no answer, and so that points to a creator, an intelligent God that created this thing that maybe allowed the Big Bang to happen. Maybe, I don't know. Anyways, okay. So also in terms of the biology and humans and animals and all of these things, biological systems, including DNA, are way too complex to occur by natural mechanisms. So if you guys know, if you studied your biology, the proteins are made from a series of DNA sequences, right? And not any DNA sequence makes a working functional protein. It takes a very specific sequence to create a protein that actually works and functions and does some job in the body, right? So if you look at scientists have looked at what sequences create functional proteins and what sequences do not. The ones that create functional proteins are way less than the ones that create nonsense, basically. So the chances of all of this happening and working together are extremely, extremely small, which again point to the idea that this randomness happened to make this work it's completely wrong. Okay, so remember I said pay attention to the things that were created on each of the days in the creation. So what was created on the fourth day? The moon, the sun, and the stars. Okay, so what do we know about the moon and the sun and the stars and our knowledge or concept of time? Our concept of time depends on the moon and the sun and the stars, right? Or no?
Yes.
It does. Okay, so what we understand or know as a day is one rotation of the earth on its own axis, right? Yes. And what we know about a year is a rotation of the earth around the sun, right? So, and this is the fourth day. So on the first day through the fourth day, we didn't have this. So the time or the days were not as what we know them to be. So they could be longer than a day. They could be thousands, millions, or even billions of years. We do not know. Because we didn't have sun and earth and anything to relate what we know as a day now to what it's talking about in the Genesis. And also, God is outside of time, right? God is not bound by time. So, yeah. So the Big Bang Theory is a prevailing cosmological model describing the rapid expansion of the universe. And it says that it's from an infinitely hot, dense single point. So this infinitely hot, dense single point definitely was not random. It could have been created by God, and it could have even been, as we know it, 13.8 billion years ago, because the concept of time in those first days were not what we know it to be now. Right? Everybody is with me? Okay, all right. Good. Okay. So there's also, I'm sure you guys have learned a theory in your science classes that's started by Darwin, something called macroevolution. The study of evolutionary change above the species level, focusing on large-scale patterns such as the origin of new groups, major transformations, and mass extinctions. So if we go back to this slide that we talked about, intelligent design, this is disproven, and this is pretty much not true, and is even now today beginning to be contradicted and disproven and disagreed upon by a lot of modern scientists. And we'll get to a video on that at the end. I have a video that kind of talks about this. On the other hand, we have something that we do actually see, something called microevolution, changes in gene frequencies over time within a population. So these things that we see, curly hair, straight hair, blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, different heights, all of these things point to something called microevolution, and we know that this is true. This does happen. there are mutations that occur, and there are something called selection that happens in genetics and biology. Okay. Okay. So one question which we already talked about is, could the Big Bang have happened with a creator and intelligent design? Yes, it's possible that it could have happened. Is macro or microevolution within the limits of Christian dogma? I would say macroevolution is outside of those limits. However, microevolution could be possible. And then I have about a 10-minute video that I actually found quite interesting on this topic that we can watch. Philo, is there audio? Let's see.
When it comes to the information string in the DNA, the contention is basically that given enough time, you run the experiment enough times, and eventually you will end up with an evolution that, and combined with natural.
Observes mutations that are good, and you will end up with something that looks designed even though it's not designed. The mutation over time being preserved by natural selection is enough. Why doesn't that work?
There's a mathematical problem, and it's a profound one. My colleague David Berlinski calls it the combinatorial problem, or the problem of combinatorial inflation. Maybe simple analogy, way to get into it. We know from our experience with software code, writing and using it, that the last thing you want in a section of functional software code is a series of random changes to those zeros and ones. If that happens, you're going to degrade the information that's in that code long before you'll ever generate a new software program or operating system. And Richard Dawkins and many others, biologists, have acknowledged that what we have in DNA is akin to machine code, or Leroy Hood puts it, digital code. It's functioning exactly the same way. So what we've learned from software writing and using is highly relevant to understanding whether or not the mutation selection mechanism would actually could generate conceivably or realistically new information. And there's a reason that changing software at random invariably degrades the information before you get anything useful and new. And that is because there's so many more ways to go wrong. In any system of digital or typographic or alphabetic communication, there are vastly more ways of arranging the characters in question that will generate gibberish than there are ways of arranging those same characters that will generate something functional. So if you start randomly changing things, you're overwhelmingly more likely to find a gibberish sequence than a functional one. And as we actually tried to quantify that, how much more likely, the quantitative odds are prohibitive. There's a scientist who worked for 14 years at Cambridge University at Douglas Act. His PhD at Caltech, went on to do long-term molecular biology research postdoc at Cambridge to try to quantify this question. How rare or common are the functional sequences that would make a new protein or a new gene capable of making a new protein? How rare are the functional ones in comparison to the non-functional ones? And for a relatively short protein of about 150 amino acids long, he determined that the ratio of functional to non-functional sequences was about 1 over 10 to the 77th power. Now to put that in context, there are only 10 to the 65th atoms in the Milky Way galaxy. So what that means is that a random search for a new functional sequence is going to be like looking for one marked atom among 10 trillion, 1 trillion galaxies of the size of the Milky Way. So, and what turns out that...
I'm just going to pause here for a second. Are you guys starting to see how ridiculous it is that this could be like a random process? Okay, I just want you to pay attention and be aware of that. Okay, all right.
Even 4 billion years of life's history is not enough time to solve a search problem of that magnitude. And I go into all the math of this in the book, and it's pretty straightforward. There's only 10 to the 40th organisms in the history of the planet. Not enough replication events to search a space 10 to the 77 big. So you're looking at, even in the whole, if you take the whole history of life on the planet into account, you're only going to be able to search a tiny fraction of the total relevant sequences. So you got a really big haystack, really small number of needles, and very little time to look for them. The bottom line is it's overwhelmingly more probable that such a search will fail than succeed in the known time of life on planet Earth, which means that the mechanism is more likely, the hypothesis that the mechanism producing information is more likely to be false than true.
And so the result of this is, as you say, that it's more likely that it's designed than that it was randomly done in terms of DNA, and that's reflected in the fossil record, to the extent that there's sort of these jumps in the fossil record, and this is what you talk about in Darwin's Doubt, is that it's not a continuous process of mutation upon mutation building one on the other just randomly.
It becomes a big engineering problem, because it's not just that there's gaps in the fossil record. You have to ask, well, how would the evolutionary process produce all the new information necessary to build these completely new body plans, new cell types, new anatomical structures? And we know it would take a lot of new information. And so then you've got to look, well, is there enough time to do that? Do you have enough trials through this mechanism? And the answer is just overwhelmingly no. It's not plausible at all mathematically. And on the flip side, we do know, however, of a cause that is sufficient to produce new information. This is why it's not a God of the gaps or an argument from ignorance. Is we're drawing, and this is Darwin's historical scientific method. When you're trying to explain an event in the remote past, you want to draw on your knowledge of cause and effect. What kind of cause is out there that we have observed that is capable of producing the effect in question? And if the effect is a lot of new digital information, we know of a cause that can do that, and it's a mind or an intelligence. And it happens that that's the only known cause that can produce lots of new information, and it's certainly much more plausible than the Darwinian idea of a random search. And we show why mathematically it's much more plausible.
Now, one of the theories about the idea that randomness is still in the system is Stephen Jay Gould's idea of punctuated equilibrium, that essentially small groups of animals kind of went away from the big group, they did all their changes, and then they reintegrated. Why doesn't that work? The idea that the jumps in the fossil record are a result of small groups breaking away in a certain level of group selection.
Yeah, Gould's model was a terrific advance as far as its accuracy in describing the fossil record, because he described these big punctuations or big jumps, and then the long-term stasis that would occur, lack of directional evolutionary change. That's what we see in the fossil record, very non-Darwinian. The problem was he didn't really have a mechanism that could accomplish that could produce the amount of change that we're seeing. And I discussed this as a whole I do a whole chapter on this in Darwin's Doubt, but the mechanism he proposed was called species selection. A lot of other evolutionary biologists, including Richard Dawkins, were very critical of the mechanism, and in a way rightly so, because what it came down to in the end was that species selection itself depended on the natural selection random mutation mechanism. And that mechanism requires lots of time to get the job done. And it turns out 4 billion years isn't enough, but it certainly the abrupt jumps that Gould was talking about were not allowing the mechanism enough time to work. So we had this kind of irony in evolutionary biology in the 80s and 90s in particular. Gould's model pretty much was dismissed by the early 2000s, but you had Gould's model was viewed as a good one for describing the fossil record accurately, but it didn't have a mechanism. The Darwinians had a mechanism, but it was inconsistent with the fossil record. And also, then, as we later critiqued, the mechanism was also lacked the creative power to generate the information necessary to build big new, major innovations in the history of life.
So from a design perspective, what exactly is the theory of how one species would become another suddenly? Is it there's a bunch of dead DNA that is suddenly activated? Or is it that something injects new information into the system? How exactly would that work?
The question of species raises this whole question of envelopes of variability. We see evidence of design at the loci of the design are when you get the major innovations occurring in the history of life. But the information that is present in a major group of organisms might be sufficient to allow a lot of variation within an envelope. So that's why there is evolution. We think there's clearly evolution that takes place. The question is how much information was present and how wide the envelopes of variability are that are generated by that information. So there's a terrific evolutionary biologist and cell biologist at the University of Chicago, also named James Shapiro, who's got a new theory of evolution he calls natural genetic engineering. And he notices that, and has documented that many of the mutations that we actually see at work are not random at all. They're an expression of what he calls pre-programmed adaptive capacity, where there's an external trigger or stress that's put on an organism, and that triggers the production of certain proteins for which the organism had the capability of building all along because it had the genetic information there. And so a lot of the evolution we see is actually pre-programmed adaptive capacity, which is really an exciting biological phenomenon that the Darwinians haven't really taken full account of, but it does raise the question of the origin of that adaptive capacity, where the pre-programming come from. So intelligent design says the inputs of information from outside the system, from an intelligence, are located in that pre-programmed adaptive capacity, but the theory also acknowledges that there's evolution possible going downstream as a result of that pre-existing information.
All right. What do you guys think? Any thoughts? Any questions? Okay, all right.